Hello, I'm Dr. Brandt Gibson. I'm going to talk to you today about foot pain and if shoes are beneficial. Now, let's take a step back and actually, I'm going to answer this in 5 different ways. Number one, really, shoes are beneficial depending on what the situation is. So when I talk about how soon you should put kids, infants, toddlers, for example, in shoes, the idea is that I recommend that they, when they're learning to walk, when they're initially starting, when they're standing and so forth, barefoot is beneficial. There's a huge benefit to being barefoot because the foot is forming, the muscles, the intrinsic muscles, the muscles that are in the foot itself are forming and getting into a position where they actually can help them balance. And so it's nice for them to have the first and fifth metatarsals that can move independently, that are not affected by the shoes, and have the foot so that the front and the back of the foot can function the way it's supposed to, so it can actually adjust for new positions and so forth, because that's how they get their balance. That's how they learn to use the feet the way they're supposed to. And then you can put them in shoes. So if your kids are going outside a lot, of course, then shoes are great. But the idea is initially as they're learning, not shoes. So that's number one. So are shoes beneficial for pain? Sometimes not being in shoes are more beneficial. Say, for example, kids, young kids and toddlers and so forth. Number two, shoes should be worn for the various activities. So if you're running a marathon, you want to wear a certain shoe, whereas if you're running on the track and you're doing a sprint, for example, it's going to be a different shoe, and tennis is going to be a different shoe, and rugby or football or basketball or baseball or soccer are all going to be different shoes, and you want to use the appropriate shoe for the activity. You don't want to use a walking shoe for running. You don't want to use a running shoe for walking because they don't quite work as well. A good running shoe, of course, is better than a walking shoe, so you could use it. It's just designed to roll differently than a walking shoe would in most cases. And with foot pain, if you're wearing the right shoes and you're getting the right support, sometimes it will alleviate the foot pain. Number three, there are certain injuries of the foot that a more supportive foot is going to help, and it's going to decrease the pain. For example, if you have a Liz Frank injury where you've sprained the center of the foot right behind the first and second metatarsal area, a supportive shoe is going to be more comfortable. If you have an Achilles tendonitis or a plantar fasciitis, a shoe with a heel is going to hurt less. It's going to be more beneficial. If you have a stress fractures, you don't want to be in just any kind of shoe. We recommend shoes with a hard sole to them, such as a post-op shoe, or sometimes we'll even put you in a 3D walking boot. Again, the shoe for the activity is beneficial, and it will alleviate and help the pain, and oftentimes help it to heal. Number four. So did you catch all those so far? So number one is when you should be wearing shoes and when you should not be. Number two is wearing the appropriate shoes for the activities. Number three is the correct support for the shoes. Sometimes, though, you can actually make your situation, your foot pain, worse based on the shoe. If you have a significant tendon weakness, being on a platform, higher shoes can be a problem. If you have a neuroma, a shoe that's more snug is actually going to make the neuroma worse. It's going to actually make it swell more and it cause more problems. So sometimes the shoes are going to make the problem worse, so you need to be more careful in what you're doing. And number five, in certain situations, you may find that barefoot running or some of those kind of things that are talked about in the Born to Run series, for example, can be beneficial. And it depends on how you run and the surfaces you're running on and so forth. So if you're saying, okay, I want to prevent injury, I'm going to go to barefoot running. One of the benefits they talk about is the development of the intrinsic muscles of the foot. That really doesn't directly work that way. The intrinsic muscles are developing early on, and they actually start to develop the way they're supposed to, and then the foot's going to start to function from there the way it does for the rest of your life. But as I tell people with orthotics, as I tell people in certain activities, if you find that you're saying, okay, I'm going to barefoot running and I seem to get more motion to my foot and so forth. That's why I like it. Your tendons and ligaments are going to adjust to the new position. So if you have no support to the foot, they're going to adjust to that position if you're doing it regular enough. If you're always in high heels, the Achilles tendon shortens to adjust the position. This is called Wolff's Law. And through Wolff's Law, it's going to adjust to the position to support the foot in that area. So that's the fifth one. Is sometimes there may be situations where not being in a shoe can be beneficial. In a lot of individuals, barefoot running should be done very carefully. I can't do it because of the way that I run and the shape of my foot. I would increase pain, create new problems, probably stress fractures of my foot if I were to run barefoot. This is Dr. Brandt Gibson, and this is your Podiatry Tips Day 332, foot pain and our shoes helpful. And I gave you 5 tips on how you can get the help.